Here is the letter the FDA sent to Revance. Revance is the company that produces Daxxify. This letter was sent back on September 7th, notifying Revance of the approval of Daxxify. As you can see, the indication described is for the treatment of moderate to severe glabellar lines associated with corrugator and or procerus muscle activity in adult patients. Of course, those are the 11 lines that you see between the brows. They go on to say your application for Daxxify was not referred to an FDA advisory committee because the application did not raise significant safety or efficacy issues that were unexpected for a biologic of this class. Now, the road to FDA approval was not a smooth one for Revance for Daxxify. In 2021, the FDA issued a Form 483 for concerns that were raised during a site visit in 2021. There were actually 5 particular concerns that include quality control measures and record keeping. There is the form there, heavily redacted, I suspect, to protect intellectual property. And in 2022, the FDA came back and issued another Form 483 with 3 additional concerns raised. All of the concerns raised in 2021 were resolved to the FDA's satisfaction. And the new issues concerning the FDA included cleaning of filtration equipment and other issues, failure to consistently respond to deviations of standard operating procedures. So this next slide is from the Revance website, and this is how they describe Daxxify, the first and only peptide-powered. We will get into that in some detail, FDA-approved frontline treatment with a median duration of 6 months and up to 9 months for some patients, and we'll review those claims as well. And they note at least 50% of patients in their phase 3 trials had no or mild frown lines for 24 weeks. And then in parentheses, they put 6 months. However, we all know that 6 months is actually over 26 weeks or longer, respectively, per both investigators and patients' assessments. And we'll get into those assessments. So here's a article overview of Daxxify for injection. This is an article from 2021, and there's this chart there, and there's charts arranged in columns. In the first column is Daxxify, and then they go in order of FDA clearance. The next one is onabotulinum toxin type A. That, of course, is Botox. That was FDA approved for aesthetic procedures in 2002, and then abobotulinum toxin is Dysport. That was FDA cleared in 2009, and then incobotulinum toxin. When you see that, that is referring to Xeomin. That was FDA approved in 2011, and then probotulinum toxin type A. That is Jeuveau, and that was the most recent one before Daxxify, and that was FDA approved in 2019. So just a few words before we go into Daxxify about Botox. Botox was FDA approved, as I say, in 2002, so it's been out for over 20 years. It's got the most FDA clearances for cosmetic uses, not just the glabella like Daxxify is approved for, but also approved for the forehead and crow's feet. Now, in those 20 years, over 100 million vials have been sold, so it has a long safety efficacy track record. Over 4,700 peer-reviewed papers have been published. It's been used in ophthalmology since the 1970s, and in 1989 they got an FDA approval for the treatment of strabismus. It's even been studied and had some favorable findings for depression, although that is not a FDA-approved indication currently. So looking at the top molecular weight in kilodaltons, you could see incobotulinum toxin, which is, again, Xeomin, and Daxxify are 150 kilodaltons, and that is just the botulinum toxin. There are no accessory proteins that add to the molecular weight, so you could see that in the second line as well, too. And then going down, contains HSA, and you can see at the bottom, HSA is human serum albumin, and the only one of that group of 5 that does not have albumin is Daxxify. Now, instead, it's got excipients the others do not have. You can see that in the next line. and one of those excipients is RTP-004, which we will address in just a little bit. The going down a little bit further can be stored at room temperature. That is unique to Daxi as well as to Xeomin. They could be shipped from the factory without refrigeration, unlike the other ones. However, once reconstituted, they do have to be refrigerated. Daxi, as you can see further down, is the only of these products that is completely sourced and manufactured in the United States. And below that, you see glabellar line dose, and it's a 40 for Daxi, and then the rest of them are 20, except for Dysport abobotulinum toxin, which is 50. There's a conversion rate of 2.5, so that's really 20 Botox equivalent units. So you can see they're all 20 Botox units or Botox equivalent units, and then the dose is 40 for Daxi. Now you could rightfully argue there is variability in the equivalencies of these four products, but typically in practice, again, with the exception of the abobotulinum toxin, these are basically treated as one-to-one conversions, although that is probably not, in reality, truly the exact case. Now, going back to the top, again, going over the albumin issue, the only one without albumin is Daxi. Now, albumin is used in the hospital extensively in the intensive care unit and operating rooms for cirrhotics, for example, who don't produce a lot of albumin, and for patients that are hypotensive. It is an effective plasma expander. Here is an article from May 2006, botulinum toxin type A therapy in human serum albumin, HSA. And they note the safety of HSA in clinical practice has been well documented. Correctly pasteurized HSA preparations have an excellent safety record in regard to virus and prion protein transmission. Safety and quality of the product are ensured through complete screening and documentation of donors, purification, and viral removal procedures, and extensive pathogen detection assays. This product contains albumin, a derivative of human blood, based on effective donor screening and product manufacturing processes. It carries an extremely remote risk for transmission of viral diseases. A theoretical risk for transmission of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is considered extremely remote. No cases of transmission of viral diseases or Creutzfeldt-Jakob have ever been identified for albumin. Bayer notes they were first licensed for albumin in 1942, and between 1980 and 1991, 20 million individuals have received 951 tons of albumin and plasma proteins. And to date, there has not been a single confirmed documented case of viral or protein transmission to any recipient of albumin reported to their company. Now, this is a 2006 article, and in the research I've done, now in 2022, I cannot find any case ever of transmission of a prion or a virus related to albumin use. Next, moving on to RTP-004. Now, RTP, I don't know if that's an acronym. I did see an article once that I can no longer locate that described it as an acronym and what it stood for. I'm not going to provide that currently since I can't source it. If anyone has that information, I'm happy to look at it. If you do want to send me a link with that information, I did send an email actually to Revance with a list of questions, that being one of the questions. That was about a week ago, and I have not received a response. So this is one of the excipients that's only in Daxi RTP-004. As you could see from the Revance website, they quantify how much, it's 11.7 micrograms, are in each vial of Daxi. And the studies have even noted that 1.2% of participants in the trials developed antibodies to RTP-004. Now, before we go into further what RTP-004 is, there's a few terms in case there are those viewing this video that are unfamiliar with some of these terms. So a protein's transduction domain is a small peptide able to carry proteins, peptides, nucleic acid, and nanoparticles, including viral particles, across cellular membranes. So the way botulinum toxin works is it does have to enter the nerve terminal and inhibit acetylcholine release, and it can't do that without actually entering the cell. So that is one term that you will see used, and the transcriptional activator protein is considered to increase transcription of a gene or a set of genes. So from the article that we cited previously, they describe RTP004 as a 35 amino acid peptide. Of course, peptides are really just chains of amino acids that is highly positively charged. And there is a benefit to being highly positive charged. The cell surface is negatively charged, so you would have a greater affinity for the cell and to enter the cell with a highly positively charged particle. At physiological pH, and forms a strong electrostatic bond with Daxi. RTP004 is wholly synthetic and is constructed with two distinct domains, a core domain of 15 consecutive lysines that is flanked at each terminus with a 10 amino acid protein transduction domain. We had noted just a moment ago that does help it go through the cell wall. The cationic, which just means positively charged, arginine-rich protein transduction domain, and RTP004 was originally identified as a region between residues 48 and 60 of the 86 amino acid transcriptional activator coded for by HIV1, a sequence that permitted transduction of proteins across cell membranes. So they do not have albumin, but do have this this item that has been taken from HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Now, RTP004 prevents absorption of Daxi to container surfaces during manufacturing, and also prevents absorption of the core neurotoxin to the vial. So they're going through what the benefit of RTP004 is. Next is a study from 2021, immunogenicity of botulinum toxin formulations. And here is a line that they do address Daxi. The formulation of Daxi is unusual in that it does not contain human serum albumin, and instead contains a proprietary HIV-derived 5 kilodalton stabilizing peptide and polysorbate 20. The adjuvant effects of these excipients, particularly the novel HIV-derived peptide that has not been used in any other drug formulation approved by the FDA, are not yet known. So, as any providers that are watching this, any patients that are considering which toxin to use, this is something that I would do independent research on and think about before you use this product. So next, going back to the article, overview of Daxi, this 2021 article, it's interesting that the author, who's well known in the topic of Botox, she was a pioneer in the use of aesthetic Botox. She's from Vancouver. Her and her husband both worked on transitioning Botox from a therapeutic ophthalmologic medication to a cosmetic medication. But in this initial article back in 1992, she describes the impact being up to 11 months. And so here is a list in that article of the studies, starting with phase 1 down to phase 3. And next, we're going to look at the phase 2 Belmont study. As you can see, they compare varying doses of Daxi, 20, 40, 60, with 20 of Botox versus a placebo. And here's a article. Okay, now here is the Belmont study, November 2017, and they describe the methods used for the study. Phase 2 randomized dose ranging. Again, there are multiple doses of Daxi. Double-blind, multi-center study throughout Canada. Subjects with moderate or severe glabellar lines at maximum frown were randomly assigned. So there's basically 5 arms to the study. There's 3 doses of Daxi, 20, 40, 60, 20 dose arm of Botox on a botulinum toxin, or placebo. Glabellar line severity was evaluated by both investigators and subjects alike every 4 weeks, and you'll see that in the data that's to follow here. So interesting. So if you look at the placebo, here is at the bottom. So the x-axis is time every 4 weeks, which is what they looked at, and then on the y-axis you could see now the IGA FWS scale. So I stands for investigators. This is the investigators' perspective, subjects with a more than 1 point improvement on that scale. So a couple interesting things to see here. Now, if you look at Daxi 60, now you might presume that more is better. So Daxi 60, the red line, actually you could see dips below the green line, which is Daxi 40. So more of Daxi is not better. Now, you could compare the yellow line, which is 20 of Daxi, versus the black line, which is 20 of Botox. So 20 versus 20. Now, you could see that the yellow line, for the most part, is above the Botox line, the black line, until you get to 24 weeks, and then they cross at that point. And then Botox, according to the investigators, was more effective at that point. And then you can see in the article, they described the percentages as 19% had achieved that goal of greater than 1 point improvement with Botox, and just slightly less, 18%, with the 20 unit dose of Daxi. Now, the next slide shows the participant or patient scale. And so this is a little bit different. Again, you can see at the bottom, I mean, the placebo's down at the bottom there. And so Botox, again, is the black line, and then Daxi is the yellow line. And you could see there are a few points where Botox is, 20 of Botox is superior according to these patients versus Daxi. That would include at week 8, and then again at week 24. And what also is interesting, if you look at the red line, again, 60 of Daxi is not superior to the lower dose of 40 at certain points along the graph. So they state, as for subject ratings, 40 units of Daxi showed statistically significant greater efficacy than 20 units of Botox. So the 20 unit Daxi showed a smaller trend towards greater efficacy relative to 20 units of Botox. That's an odd way of saying at certain points inferior to. So the verbiage here seems to have some advocacy in it. So next is a chart, which basically just gives their data. It's a very busy chart, and we'll just address a few topics here. So let's just look at the second column, which is 20 units of Daxi, and then the final column, which is 20 units of Botox. So you could see week 20, we'll look at just week 24, since we're really focusing on longevity here. So the investigator of the IGA FWS scale, the investigators for 1 point improvement had rated Botox higher than Daxi. Again, this is data obtained from the Belmont study, and then going down to week 24 with none or mild, which is a pretty aggressive goal, you could see it was slightly higher for Botox. Now going down to the middle section, which is the patient rating, you can see at 24 weeks, for 1 point improvement, it is greater for Botox. It is greater for 2 point improvement, a little bit more aggressive of a goal for Botox as well. And then it is greater for Daxi for none or mild at week 24. And then they go into a different scale, the GAIS, and in that the investigator significantly rated Daxi more effective at 20 versus 20. And then the very bottom, the subject, again, Botox by the subjects, participants in the study, was rated higher at 24 weeks. So now they in the text, they state the 20 unit dose of Daxi showed apparent clinical superiority over 20 units of Botox. And then they say that was most notable when comparing the proportion of subjects achieving at least a 1-point improvement in the investigator rating of glabellar line severity, and when comparing the proportion of subjects whose glabellar lines were rated as none or mild severity. Now, we just reviewed the data. I think that is not a accurate statement based on the data. There are times that certain lines would cross, and Daxi was greater, and other times, including some of those points at 24 weeks, where Botox was greater. So anyway, when you review medical literature, it's important to really look at the fine details. The results of the study refer to the Revance injectable formulation of botulinum toxin type A and cannot be generalized to other formulations or serotypes of botulinum toxin type A. The potency units of botulinum toxins are not interchangeable, so that's how they really rationalize comparing 40 of Daxi to 20 of Botox, and not 20 versus 20 or 40 versus 40, 60 versus 60. As a result, units of Daxi should not be equated with the same number of units of Botox, as the relative potencies of Daxi and Botox have not been established. Okay, next we'll look at the phase 3 trials briefly. So methods, there were 2 phase 3 multicenter randomized trials, and the subjects had moderate severe glabellar lines and maximum frown. Now, they had settled on the phase 2 trials on 40 units of Daxi, so in phase 3, that's the dose they were going to use. So they were going to compare it 40 to placebo, and they, like the previous trial, had evaluated the findings every 4 weeks. So looking at the first diagram here, you can see placebos at the bottom, the x-axis in both these graphs. Now, the top graph is the first of the phase 3 trials, Sakura 1, and then the second one at the bottom. So they're parallel trials. And the dark line in both graphs is the investigators, which is consistently better than the subjects' interpretation of the results. And on the y-axis is the results, subjects with glabellar line severity of none or mild, so pretty aggressive goal. And so you could see, it peaks about week 4, and then it drops off. Now, it's interesting to see where it crosses 50%. So you could look at the highest line, the investigator, that's about 20 weeks in the Sakura 1, and then the bottom chart crosses 50, perhaps slightly later, maybe just past 20 weeks. But if you look at 6 months or 26 weeks or even 24 weeks, you're well below 50%. Now, if you look at the data in chart form, you could see kind of a busy graph, but at week 20, you could see the number of subjects with the who have reached a goal is 53.2% in the first trial, and then 54.4% in the second trial at week 20, and then week 24 that drops to 35 and 29 respectively. So sometime between week 20 and 24, that 50% threshold was crossed. However, the data was compiled in such a way that this graph was produced, and it shows that the median duration of achieving none or mild glabellar line severity was at week 24. And then the darker line is Sakura 1, and the lighter line is Sakura 2, the other phase 3 trial. So I'm not sure how that was achieved based on the data that we just reviewed. And so I certainly would invite any feedback on that to see how that result was achieved. So now, leaving Daxi, let's look at long-term effectiveness results with other of the FDA-cleared neurotoxins. So looking at Xeomin, incobotulinum toxin type A, they gave up to 100 units of incobotulinum toxin. And then they said of that group, at 1 year, majority, 69%, still had not returned to baseline. So 52 weeks. And then, so the next article, botulinum toxin type A for glabellar frown lines. What's the impact of higher doses? This is a 2021 article. And around 9 months, median duration was achieved with a 2 to 2.5 fold increase of the dose of Dysport, abobotulinum toxin, or with a 5-fold increased dose of incobotulinum toxin, which again is Xeomin, and it isn't underlined, but a 2 to 4 fold increase of onabotulinum toxin, which is Botox. So 3 of them, I think this probably preceded prabobotulinum toxin. So really all 3, with increasing the dose, were known to have a significant increased duration. And another article, new study, this is 2018, examined safety and efficacy of higher dose Botox. The median benefit of 40 units of Botox is between 20 and 24 weeks. Here's a study about Dysport's abobotulinum toxin, a 36-week study evaluating the efficacy of, as well as the subject satisfaction and psychological well-being with increasing doses of Dysport, found significant and sustained improvement up to 36 weeks, so well past 24, in glabellar line severity. The conclusion of the study, a single treatment provided significant and sustained improvements in glabellar line severity up to 36 weeks. Treatment satisfaction was high with all doses. Participants reported natural and youthful appearance alongside improvements in psychological well-being. So, in summary, you can get, there does appear to be a dose-dependent relationship with all FDA-cleared neurotoxins, perhaps except for Daxi, in which the 60-unit dose was at times inferior to the 40-unit dose. That does not appear to be the case with the other ones. Doesn't look like that was really looked at with Jeuveau. So now other issues are the excipients, and that there is a HIV-derived peptide in Daxi and not in the other options. So when you review medical data, it is important to consider biases and other variables that might affect the reliability, reproducibility of these results. Here are some quotes that I will leave you with from editors of The Lancet, editors of the New England Journal, and an editor of the British Medical Journal, about some of their takes on medical research. So take everything with a grain of salt. Do your own research. Hopefully this was a good place to get you started, to help you decide which product you use, if any, and if you're a provider, which product you will provide to your patients. Have a good day.